My beloved child, before you continue with anything else, pause here for a moment, because something quiet has been moving beneath the surface of your ordinary days, and you have felt it without fully understanding why. There has been a strange pull in your spirit lately, a feeling that someone, somewhere, has been trying to find their way closer to you without knowing how to explain it. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just softly, persistently. Like footsteps approaching from a distance you cannot yet see. And tonight, there is something you must hear carefully, because someone has been asking questions about where you live, not out of cold curiosity, not out of empty conversation, but because there is something connected to your presence that they have not been able to ignore anymore. Stay a little longer, because this story is unfolding more deeply than it first appears. What makes this moment unusual is not the question itself. People ask about places every day. They ask for directions, locations, neighborhoods, buildings, streets. But this feels different, doesn't it? Somewhere inside you, there has already been a shift, a subtle awareness that someone has been trying to piece together parts of your world quietly, carefully, almost hesitantly. They have been thinking about the atmosphere around you, the energy of your home, the life you live when nobody is watching. Because sometimes a person does not search for an address simply to arrive at a location. Sometimes they are trying to understand the heart that lives there. Sometimes they are trying to open a door that has remained emotionally closed for far too long. And this is where everything begins to change. There is someone connected to your path who has spent more time thinking about you than you realize. Not in a restless or unhealthy way, but in the way a person thinks about a chapter they cannot stop returning to. They remember small details. Tiny moments. The tone of your voice when you were trying to hide exhaustion. The pauses between your words when you pretended everything was fine. They noticed the kindness you gave even when your own heart felt heavy. And over time, something inside them started asking questions they could no longer silence. Who are you when the world becomes quiet? What kind of space do you return to at night? What memories live inside your walls? What dreams sit beside your window when nobody else can see them? Do not skip this part, because the reason they are searching is not as simple as it first appears. There are moments in life when a person suddenly realizes they have been standing outside an emotional doorway for too long. They begin to understand that distance has protected them from vulnerability. But it has also protected them from connection. And lately, this person has been feeling that realization deeply. They have reached a point where surface conversations no longer satisfy them. Smiles are no longer enough. Casual interactions feel incomplete. They want to understand something real now. Something deeper. Something human. And strangely enough, every path of thought keeps leading them back toward you. But listen carefully, because this next part matters. The door they are trying to open may not be a physical one at all. Yes, they are asking about your home address. Yes, they are trying to understand where you are, where you spend your quiet moments, where your energy rests after difficult days. But beneath all of that is another truth entirely. They are trying to open a version of closeness that has remained locked between you for a very long time. A conversation unfinished. A feeling unspoken. A connection interrupted before it had the chance to fully breathe. And perhaps the reason this message found you tonight is because you already sensed it. You may have noticed unusual thoughts crossing your mind lately. Memories appearing suddenly. Certain songs feeling more emotional than before. Random moments where you stopped and wondered why someone's presence still lingers around your spirit even in silence. That is not coincidence. Human hearts often recognize movement long before the mind understands it. Something important is shifting quietly in the background of your life, and while nothing has fully revealed itself yet, the atmosphere around you is beginning to change. There is also something else you should know. This person has not approached this lightly. They have hesitated more times than you can imagine. At one point, they convinced themselves they should remain distant. They tried to ignore the feeling entirely. They distracted themselves with routines, conversations, responsibilities, endless noise. But every attempt to move away emotionally only brought them back to the same realization: there is something unfinished surrounding you. Something unresolved. Something that keeps calling their attention back. And tonight, while the world around you continues normally, they are quietly thinking about how to cross the space between where they are and where you are. Not because they want to disrupt your peace, but because your peace itself has become meaningful to them. That is what changes everything. People do not search for depth unless something inside them has awakened. And lately, this person has been awakening emotionally in ways they did not expect. They have started recognizing how rare it is to encounter someone whose presence feels calming instead of draining. Someone whose silence feels safe instead of uncomfortable. Someone whose energy lingers long after conversations end. You may not fully understand your impact yet, but you have left traces inside someone's heart that cannot simply disappear. Stay till the end, because there is still something important waiting for you here. The strange part is that this connection may have started long before either of you realized its significance. Sometimes two lives move around each other quietly for months, even years, before one moment suddenly changes the meaning of everything. A glance becomes unforgettable. A conversation gains new emotional weight. A memory returns differently. And suddenly, a person who once felt distant begins feeling deeply familiar. This is why the search has begun. Not out of impulse. Not out of obsession. But out of emotional clarity. They are beginning to understand that certain people enter your life for a reason larger than convenience. Larger than timing. Larger than logic. And somewhere in the middle of ordinary days, they started realizing your existence carries a feeling they cannot replace elsewhere. But there is still hesitation in them. Because opening emotional doors requires courage. They do not fully know what waits on the other side. They do not know whether you would welcome their honesty or retreat from it. They do not know whether the timing is finally right or still unfinished. And yet, despite all these uncertainties, they continue moving closer to the truth of what they feel. That is why your name has remained in their thoughts. That is why your presence keeps returning during quiet hours. That is why questions about your world have slowly begun appearing. And there is something almost beautiful about this moment. Because while they are trying to find a way toward you, you are also being prepared emotionally for something new to unfold. Even your recent exhaustion has had meaning. Even your loneliness has been teaching you something. You have been learning how to recognize genuine energy from temporary attention. You have been learning that real connection feels calm, not chaotic. Gentle, not forced. Honest, not performative. And perhaps that is why this unfolding is happening slowly instead of suddenly. Because some doors should never be opened carelessly. The heart is one of them. Right now, somewhere beyond your immediate view, someone is sitting with thoughts they cannot easily explain. They are replaying conversations. Reconsidering choices. Wondering whether distance has already lasted too long. Wondering whether life quietly placed you in their path for a reason they almost ignored. And the more they think about it, the more impossible it becomes to walk away emotionally unchanged. But this is only the beginning. Because the real question is not whether they find your address. The real question is what happens after they finally find the courage to open what has remained emotionally closed between you both for so long. And that answer has not revealed itself fully yet. My beloved child, there is a reason your heart became quiet after hearing the last message, because somewhere deep inside you, something recognized the truth hidden between the lines. Not every connection arrives loudly. Not every important moment announces itself with certainty. Some things approach slowly, like evening light entering a room one corner at a time. And right now, someone is standing at the edge of an emotional decision they never expected to face. They thought time would weaken what they felt. They thought distance would simplify everything. But instead, every passing day has only made your presence feel more significant in their mind. And tonight, they are no longer trying to ignore it. There is something almost impossible to explain about the way a person begins searching for closeness after pretending they no longer need it. At first, they ask small questions casually. They speak your name carefully. They wonder how you have been. Then slowly, without even realizing it, they begin trying to understand your world more deeply. The streets around you. The atmosphere you live in. The life you return to after long days. It is never truly about the location itself. It is about feeling closer to the version of you that exists beyond appearances. And this person, they have been imagining your world quietly. Not in fantasy. Not in illusion. But in tenderness. They wonder what your evenings feel like when everything becomes silent. They wonder whether you still carry hidden worries behind your calm expressions. They wonder if you sit alone sometimes thinking about people who slowly disappeared from your life without explanation. Somehow, without you speaking these things aloud, they have sensed parts of your emotional reality anyway. That is why this connection has become difficult for them to dismiss. Because when someone begins caring about the unseen parts of you, everything changes. Stay here for a moment longer, because what unfolds next matters more than you think. There was a recent moment, perhaps very recent, where this person almost reached out completely. They almost crossed the emotional distance fully. But fear interrupted them at the last second. Not fear of you, fear of vulnerability. Fear of being misunderstood. Fear that timing may still be uncertain. So instead of speaking directly, they remained quiet again, yet internally, their emotions continued growing louder. And that silence you felt around you lately? That strange emotional tension? It may have been connected to this very moment. Because human hearts communicate long before words arrive. This person has started realizing that your energy affects them in ways they cannot logically organize anymore. You calm parts of them that usually remain restless. You make them reflect more deeply. You make them question what genuine connection is supposed to feel like. And strangely, the more they try to analyze these emotions rationally, the less logical everything becomes. That is how meaningful connections often begin. Not through perfect timing. Not through certainty. But through quiet emotional recognition. There is also something else you deserve to understand tonight. The reason they are trying to open this is because they have slowly realized you are not someone they can keep standing outside of emotionally forever. They have spent enough time observing from a distance. Enough time pretending friendship, curiosity, coincidence, or timing were the only reasons your paths continued crossing. Deep down, they know there is more here now. And whether they fully admit it aloud yet or not. Their actions are beginning to reveal what their words still hesitate to say. But do not misunderstand this moment. This is not about rushing into anything. This is about awakening. Because before any meaningful connection fully enters your life, there is usually a period where everything feels uncertain and emotionally unfinished. Questions appear without answers. Feelings deepen without explanation. Silence becomes strangely heavy. And during that phase, both people are being transformed quietly before the next chapter can begin. That transformation is happening right now. You may have noticed yourself becoming more emotionally aware recently. More reflective. More selective about energy. Certain conversations no longer satisfy you. Certain people no longer feel aligned with your spirit. You have outgrown shallow interactions without even realizing it. And while you sometimes mistake this growth for loneliness, it is actually preparation. Preparation for connections that carry depth instead of noise. This person feels the difference when it comes to you. That is why they cannot fully walk away emotionally. And tonight, while they continue searching for ways to move closer, they are also confronting truths about themselves they avoided for a long time. They are realizing how often they protected themselves by remaining emotionally distant. How often they waited too long to express genuine feelings. How often fear disguised itself as patience. But something about you disrupted those old patterns. You made them want to be emotionally honest again. Do not skip this next part, because it may explain more than you expected. There is a memory connected to you that this person returns to repeatedly. Maybe it was a conversation. Maybe it was a simple moment nobody else would consider important. Maybe it was the way you looked at them when they felt misunderstood by everyone else. But whatever happened in that moment left a permanent emotional mark on them. They replay it during quiet nights. They think about things they should have said differently. They wonder whether you understood the meaning hidden beneath their silence. And perhaps you did. Because part of you has also been waiting for clarity. Not dramatic clarity. Not overwhelming declarations. Just truth. Just sincerity. Just a moment where someone finally stops hiding what they genuinely feel. The atmosphere surrounding this connection has been building toward that moment for longer than either of you realize. Even the delays have had purpose. Sometimes life slows things down intentionally so emotions can mature into something real instead of temporary. Sometimes distance exists not to separate two people, but to prepare them to finally recognize each other properly. And this person is beginning to recognize you now in a way they never fully allowed themselves to before. Not just as someone interesting. Not just as someone memorable. But as someone emotionally significant. That realization has changed their entire perspective. Because now every unanswered feeling feels heavier. Every unfinished conversation feels louder. Every passing day without honesty feels incomplete. And slowly, they are reaching the point where silence no longer feels easier than truth. There is another detail you should hear tonight. This person has imagined what it would feel like to finally stand in your presence without emotional distance between you. To speak freely. To stop pretending there is nothing deeper underneath the connection. To allow the walls to lower naturally instead of hiding behind uncertainty. And every time they imagine that possibility, something inside them softens. Because your energy feels like safety to them. Not perfection. Not fantasy. Safety. A rare kind of emotional peace they do not encounter often. And in a world where most people feel temporary, rushed, distracted, or emotionally unavailable, that feeling has become impossible for them to ignore. Stay till the end, because there is one truth they still have not fully spoken aloud. They are afraid that if they wait too long, the opportunity to open this connection honestly may disappear forever. That fear has been growing quietly inside them. Not panic. Not desperation. Just awareness. Awareness that meaningful people do not remain emotionally accessible forever if nobody has the courage to reach toward them sincerely. And lately, they have started sensing that you are changing too. Growing. Healing. Becoming more protective of your peace. They can feel that your heart is no longer willing to accept confusion disguised as affection. Which means if they approach you now, they must approach honestly. No games. No emotional hiding. No half-truths. Only sincerity. And perhaps that is exactly why they have been hesitating at the edge of this moment for so long. Because opening emotional doors requires more courage than most people expect. Especially when the connection feels real. Tonight, while the world around you continues normally, an invisible shift is still happening quietly between your lives. Thoughts are deepening. Feelings are becoming clearer. Emotional walls are weakening one realization at a time. And somewhere inside them, a question keeps repeating over and over again. What if you were never just another passing connection? What if you were the person they were always meant to stop running from emotionally? And the closer they come to answering that question honestly, the closer everything moves toward a moment neither of you will be able to ignore anymore. My beloved child. Something unusual is happening tonight, and if you listen carefully, you will understand why your spirit has felt suspended between curiosity and emotion these past few days. There are moments in life when invisible threads begin tightening quietly between two people, not to trap them, not to confuse them, but to guide them toward a truth they have delayed for far too long. And somewhere, while the night moves gently around the world, someone is no longer asking themselves whether you matter to them. That question has already been answered deep inside their heart. The only thing they are struggling with now is what to do about it. For a long time, they convinced themselves that distance was safer. Safer than honesty. Safer than vulnerability. Safer than allowing emotions to grow beyond control. They kept things manageable. Careful. Measured. But feelings do not always remain within the limits people try to create for them. Sometimes a connection grows quietly beneath ordinary conversations until one day a person suddenly realizes they are emotionally invested far more deeply than they intended. That realization arrived for them recently. And it changed everything. At first, they tried to dismiss it again. They told themselves they were simply overthinking. They tried distracting themselves with responsibilities, routines, endless movement, endless noise. But no matter how occupied they became, your presence continued returning to them during the quietest parts of the day. They would hear a phrase that reminded them of you. They would pass by a familiar place and suddenly think about conversations they shared with you months ago. They would catch themselves imagining what you were doing at random moments without even meaning to. And slowly, without warning, they realized something that unsettled them deeply. You had become emotionally irreplaceable. Stay here with this message a little longer, because the next part carries something important for your heart. The reason they have been asking about your home address is not because they are trying to invade your world. It is because emotionally, they have already been standing at the edge of your world for quite some time now. They are trying to understand whether there is still space for them inside it. Whether the emotional door between you remains slightly open, or whether they waited too long and allowed silence to build walls neither of you intended. And this uncertainty has been affecting them more than they admit. Because the closer a connection feels to becoming real, the more frightening honesty becomes. There are nights when this person sits alone replaying moments with you in their mind, searching for hidden meanings inside ordinary interactions. They think about the pauses between your words. The way your eyes soften during certain conversations. The moments where your energy felt strangely aligned with theirs. And then they wonder whether you felt it too, or whether they imagined everything alone. But deep inside, they know it was real. Because people do not search for someone emotionally over and over again unless something profound has already begun awakening inside them. And perhaps part of you already knew this. Perhaps that explains the strange emotional pull you have felt recently. The sense that something unfinished keeps circling back toward you. The feeling that someone has been thinking about you more intensely than usual. Human intuition is powerful, my child. Hearts often recognize emotional movement long before reality fully reveals it. There is another truth unfolding quietly tonight. This person has started imagining what life would feel like if they stopped hiding from this connection completely. They imagine conversations that last longer than expected. Shared silence that feels comforting instead of awkward. They imagine finally expressing truths they have kept buried beneath caution for too long. And strangely, every version of that future feels peaceful to them. That peace is what frightens them most. Because peace is difficult to find in a world where so many connections feel temporary. You entered their life differently. You made them slow down emotionally. You made them reflect. You made them feel seen in ways they were not prepared for. And once a person experiences that kind of emotional recognition, it becomes impossible to return to shallow feelings comfortably. Do not skip this part, because you may recognize yourself in what comes next. This connection did not grow through dramatic moments alone. It grew through subtle things. Through consistency. Through emotional presence. Through the way you carried yourself when nobody else noticed. They watched how you handled disappointment quietly. They noticed how you continued giving kindness even when your own heart felt exhausted. They saw the softness in you that the world sometimes overlooks because you hide your struggles behind calmness. And somewhere along the way, admiration became attachment. Attachment became emotional longing. And emotional longing slowly became something much deeper than either of you expected. Now they find themselves standing emotionally between two impossible choices: continue hiding what they feel and risk losing you slowly, or finally step forward honestly and risk changing everything forever. That is the crossroads they are standing at tonight. And you should know this carefully. Because their silence has never meant absence of feeling. If anything, it has often meant the opposite. Some people become quieter when emotions grow stronger because they fear mishandling something meaningful. They fear saying too much too soon. They fear vulnerability exposing parts of themselves they spent years protecting. This person carries those fears heavily. They are not emotionless. They are overwhelmed by emotions they no longer know how to contain properly. That is why they keep circling back toward you. Because no matter how hard they try to move emotionally elsewhere, something inside them refuses to disconnect fully. And lately, that internal resistance has been growing stronger. There was a moment recently where they almost reached out impulsively. Almost sent a message. Almost asked a direct question. Almost admitted something they have hidden for a very long time. But once again, hesitation interrupted them. Not because the feeling disappeared, but because the feeling became too real to handle casually anymore. And yet despite all their hesitation, they continue searching. That alone tells you everything. People do not continue searching for emotional closeness unless their heart has already chosen its direction. Stay till the end, because something deeply personal is unfolding beneath these words. You may not realize it yet, but your presence has become connected to healing inside this person's life. Not dramatic healing. Quiet healing. The kind that happens slowly when someone begins feeling emotionally safe enough to lower defenses they carried for years. Around you, they feel less pressure to perform. Less pressure to pretend. Less pressure to hide uncertainty beneath confidence. Your energy allows them to breathe differently emotionally. And once someone experiences that kind of emotional relief, they begin craving it without fully understanding why. That is what has been happening here. You became a feeling they did not know they were missing. A calmness they did not know they needed. A sincerity that disrupted the emotional numbness they had normalized for too long. This is why they have started wanting to understand your world more deeply now. Not because of curiosity alone, but because emotionally, they are trying to imagine whether they belong somewhere inside your future. That thought has become impossible for them to ignore. And there is something almost heartbreaking about the way they wrestle with it privately. They wonder whether you would welcome them if they finally approached honestly. They wonder whether your heart still carries openness toward them or whether disappointment has already built quiet distance between you. They wonder whether timing has already slipped away while they remain silent. These thoughts follow them constantly now. Sometimes while they work. Sometimes while they try sleeping. Sometimes during completely ordinary moments when your name suddenly enters their mind without warning. And every time it happens, the same realization returns. You are not emotionally temporary to them. That realization has become heavier than silence itself. But tonight there is another layer to this story that you have not fully seen yet. This person is beginning to recognize that you have changed too. They can feel it. Your energy no longer feels endlessly available the way it once did. There is more wisdom in your silence now. More discernment. More emotional self-respect. You have stopped chasing people who remain emotionally inconsistent. You have stopped begging for clarity from those unwilling to give honesty freely. Somewhere along your journey, pain transformed into awareness. And that transformation matters deeply. Because now, if someone wishes to enter your emotional world, they must do so genuinely. Half-hearted energy will no longer survive near you. And whether this person fully understands it consciously or not, they sense that truth strongly. That is why they have become more serious internally. Because they know your heart deserves sincerity now. Not confusion. Not mixed signals. Not emotional games. Only truth. And truth is exactly what they have been avoiding within themselves. Until now. Tonight, something inside them feels different. Softer. More certain. As if the emotional resistance they carried for months is slowly weakening. They are becoming tired of pretending distance feels natural when every emotion inside them keeps moving in your direction. They are becoming tired of analyzing instead of feeling. Tired of watching instead of speaking. And the more they sit with these emotions quietly, the clearer one truth becomes. They do not want to remain emotionally disconnected from you anymore. There is also something beautiful happening simultaneously within you. Even if you cannot fully see it yet. You are learning how to receive connection without abandoning yourself emotionally. In the past, you may have accepted uncertainty because you feared losing people. You may have tolerated inconsistency because you hoped patience alone could transform confusion into clarity. But your spirit has evolved beyond that now. You have learned that real connection should not leave you constantly anxious about where you stand. This growth inside you is preparing you for a different kind of emotional experience. One built on sincerity instead of guessing. One built on emotional presence instead of emotional absence. And perhaps that is why this person's heart keeps returning toward you now more strongly than before. Because consciously or unconsciously, they recognize your value differently than they once did. Sometimes people only understand the depth of a connection after they risk losing access to it emotionally. That realization has humbled them quietly. Because now they see what your presence actually brought into their life. Comfort, warmth, perspective, emotional grounding, hope. Not loud hope. Quiet hope. The kind that slowly changes a person from within. And suddenly, ordinary interactions with everyone else feel less meaningful compared to the emotional depth they experienced with you. That comparison has become impossible for them to escape. Do not skip this next moment, because it carries the emotional center of everything unfolding tonight. There is a part of this person that already imagines standing before you honestly one day, without fear, without emotional hiding, without pretending their feelings are smaller than they truly are. They imagine finally allowing the truth to exist openly between you both. They imagine hearing your voice without emotional distance separating the moment. They imagine finally asking the questions they have carried silently for so long. And in every version of that imagined future, your presence feels like home to them. Not a physical place. An emotional home. A feeling of being understood without exhausting explanation. A feeling of emotional rest after years of carrying invisible heaviness alone. That is what they are truly searching for now. Not merely your address. Not merely your location. But the possibility of closeness. The possibility of truth. The possibility that the connection they keep feeling is real enough to change both your lives forever. And tonight, while they sit quietly with thoughts they can no longer suppress, something important is happening within them. Fear is slowly losing its power. Not completely. But enough. Enough for honesty to begin rising higher than hesitation. Enough for action to begin feeling more necessary than silence. Enough for them to realize that some connections are too meaningful to leave unfinished forever. And perhaps that is why this message reached you exactly now. Because emotionally, both of you are approaching a threshold neither heart can avoid much longer. A threshold where hidden feelings begin demanding clarity. Where emotional distance becomes unbearable. Where silence finally stops feeling safer than truth. And my child, the moment that threshold fully opens between you both, nothing about this connection will remain the same again. My beloved child. There is a quiet shift happening tonight that cannot be seen with ordinary eyes, yet it is changing the emotional direction of two lives at the same time. Somewhere, while the world continues with its usual noise and distractions, someone has been sitting with thoughts about you that no longer feel temporary. At first, they tried to keep those thoughts controlled, organized, reasonable. But emotions do not always remain small simply because a person asks them to. Sometimes feelings grow in silence until they become impossible to carry alone. And that is exactly where this person finds themselves now, standing in the middle of an emotional realization that has slowly transformed the way they see you, the way they see themselves, and the way they imagine the future. For a long time, they believed they could maintain emotional distance while still keeping you somewhere nearby in their life. They thought they could stay careful, reserved, unrevealing. But every attempt to stay emotionally detached only created a deeper awareness of your absence whenever you were not around. They began noticing how conversations with others felt incomplete afterward. They began noticing how often their mind searched for your energy in crowded rooms, in random moments, in quiet evenings. And perhaps the most surprising part for them was realizing that your impact was not fading with time, it was deepening. That frightened them more than they expected. Because deep connections require decisions. And decisions require honesty. Stay here with these words for a little longer, because tonight something important is waiting underneath them. There is a memory this person carries involving you that they have never spoken about openly. A simple moment, perhaps so ordinary you barely remember it yourself. Maybe it was the way you listened when they felt misunderstood. Maybe it was the calmness in your voice during a difficult conversation. Maybe it was the way your eyes softened for just a second before you looked away again. Whatever it was, that moment remained with them long after everything else faded. And over time, it became emotionally significant in ways they never intended. That is the strange thing about real connection, my child. It often grows from the smallest moments. Not grand performances. Not dramatic scenes. Just honesty. Presence. The feeling of being emotionally recognized without having to explain every hidden part of yourself. You gave them that feeling. And now they cannot forget it. There are nights where this person sits quietly wondering whether you understand your own effect on people. They wonder whether you realize how calming your presence can feel. How grounding your energy becomes during emotionally chaotic seasons. They wonder whether you know that your kindness reached them during moments when they secretly felt disconnected from everyone around them. You became emotionally important to them before they even understood what was happening. That realization arrived slowly, then all at once. And now, every emotion they tried suppressing keeps returning stronger than before. Do not skip this part, because what they are trying to open is becoming clearer now. At first, they thought they were searching for practical answers. A location. A direction. A way to feel physically closer to you. But underneath those questions was something far more personal. They were searching for emotional permission. Permission to stop pretending this connection means less than it actually does. Permission to finally step beyond uncertainty and acknowledge what their heart has been whispering for months. Because silence has become exhausting for them now. They are tired of replaying unfinished conversations internally. Tired of wondering what could happen if honesty finally entered this connection fully. Tired of carrying emotions they cannot comfortably hide anymore. And lately, the possibility of losing you emotionally has started feeling heavier than the fear of vulnerability itself. That is why their attention keeps moving toward your world again and again. Not out of restlessness. Out of longing. Longing for clarity. Longing for closeness. Longing for the emotional peace they only seem to experience around you. And perhaps part of you has sensed this without understanding why. Perhaps that explains why your own thoughts have become more reflective recently. Why certain memories keep returning unexpectedly. Why your intuition feels alert, almost as if your heart is quietly preparing itself for something meaningful approaching from a distance. Human beings are more emotionally connected than they realize. Especially when feelings remain unfinished. There is another truth unfolding tonight that you deserve to hear carefully. This person does not admire you because they believe you are perfect. They admire you because you feel real to them. In a world where so many people hide behind performance, your sincerity stood out immediately. Even your flaws felt honest. Even your quietness carried authenticity. Around you, they did not feel pressured to perform a version of themselves designed to impress others. Instead, they felt understood. That feeling became addictive in the gentlest possible way. And now, after trying repeatedly to create emotional distance, they are finally beginning to admit something to themselves they avoided for a very long time. They miss you even when nothing dramatic has happened between you. That kind of missing comes from emotional attachment, not temporary fascination. Stay till the end, because this next part may explain the emotional tension you have both been carrying silently. There has been an invisible emotional wall standing between you for some time now. Not created by hatred. Not created by rejection. Created by hesitation. Two people sensing depth at the same time but fearing the consequences of acknowledging it too openly. And while life continued moving normally around both of you, this invisible wall remained standing quietly in the background. But now something is changing. The wall is weakening. Not because circumstances suddenly became perfect, but because emotions have become too real to ignore. This person has started imagining what honesty would actually feel like between you. Not fantasy. Not unrealistic dreams. Just honesty. They imagine conversations where neither of you hides behind emotional caution anymore. They imagine speaking openly about the connection instead of pretending ambiguity feels comfortable. And strangely, every time they imagine that future, they feel relief instead of fear. That emotional relief keeps drawing them back toward you internally. Because deep down, they know this connection has never been ordinary. You entered their life carrying something rare, emotional safety. Not everyone understands how valuable that truly is until they experience its absence everywhere else. Around you, they feel calmer. More thoughtful. More emotionally awake. More themselves. And now they are beginning to realize how difficult it would be to lose access to that feeling permanently. That realization has changed the way they think about you entirely. No longer as someone interesting. No longer as someone special, in vague terms. But as someone whose presence genuinely affects the quality of their emotional world. And once a person reaches that realization, distance stops feeling emotionally sustainable. Do not skip this next moment, my child. Because it carries something deeply personal. There are things this person wishes they had said to you already. Words they rehearsed privately but never spoke aloud. Moments they delayed unnecessarily because fear convinced them there would always be more time later. But lately, the idea of later has started frightening them. Because meaningful connections are not guaranteed forever. People change. Lives shift. Opportunities disappear quietly. And somewhere inside themselves, they are beginning to understand that waiting indefinitely may become the greatest regret of all. That awareness has created urgency inside them, not chaotic urgency, but emotional clarity. Clarity that your presence matters. Clarity that silence no longer protects them. Clarity that vulnerability may actually be the only path forward now. And perhaps this is why your spirit has felt restless lately too. Because on some invisible emotional level, you are both approaching the same realization simultaneously. The connection between you cannot remain undefined forever. Sooner or later, truth always asks to be acknowledged. And truth has been gathering strength quietly between you for longer than either of you realizes. This person has also begun noticing something beautiful about your growth recently. They can sense that you are no longer emotionally chasing people the way you once may have. There is more calmness in you now. More self-awareness. More emotional discipline. You have learned how to protect your peace without becoming emotionally cold. That transformation has affected them deeply. Because now they understand that if they truly wish to move closer to you, they must approach sincerely. Superficial attention will no longer reach your heart. Confusion will no longer keep your interest. Emotional inconsistency will no longer feel acceptable to you. And oddly enough, this realization has made them respect you even more. You taught them something important without directly trying to. You taught them that real connection requires emotional courage. And tonight, while they sit quietly with emotions growing stronger by the hour, they are slowly preparing themselves for a decision they once believed they could avoid forever. A decision to either remain silent and risk emotional loss, or finally step toward honesty despite uncertainty. That decision has been consuming their thoughts lately. Because every path forward now changes something permanently. If they continue hiding their emotions, the distance between you may eventually become too wide to cross naturally again. But if they finally open this emotional door honestly, everything between you could transform forever. And despite all their fear, all their hesitation, all their caution, part of them desperately wants to know what happens if they finally choose truth. There is also something important you must understand about yourself tonight. You were never difficult to love. You were simply waiting for someone emotionally mature enough to recognize your depth properly. Too often, people encountered your kindness without appreciating its rarity. Too often, they enjoyed your emotional warmth without understanding how deeply you actually feel things. But this person, slowly, painfully, beautifully, has begun understanding. They understand now that your calmness hides enormous emotional strength. They understand now that your gentleness should never be mistaken for weakness. They understand now that your silence often carries more sincerity than most people's loudest promises. And once they recognized those truths, they could no longer return emotionally to the version of themselves that treated this connection casually. That version of them is disappearing. A more honest version is beginning to emerge instead. Stay here until the final words tonight, because something significant is approaching quietly. Right now, somewhere beyond your view, this person is thinking about what it would feel like to finally stop standing outside your emotional world looking in. They are imagining what it would feel like to enter honestly instead of cautiously circling around their feelings forever. They are imagining conversations where both of you finally stop pretending uncertainty is easier than truth. And for the first time in a very long time, hope is beginning to feel stronger than fear inside them. Not loud hope. Not reckless hope, quiet hope. The kind that slowly changes a person's decisions from within. The kind that makes someone brave enough to risk honesty after months of emotional hiding. The kind that makes someone realize that some connections are simply too meaningful to abandon unfinished. And my child. The closer they move toward that realization completely, the closer your lives move toward a moment neither heart will be able to turn away from anymore. My beloved child, tonight feels different for a reason, and even if you cannot fully explain the shift inside your heart yet, something within you already understands that a quiet chapter is beginning to open. There are moments in life when emotions stop hiding in the background and slowly begin stepping into the light, not dramatically, not all at once, but gently, persistently, until truth can no longer remain unspoken. And somewhere tonight, someone is standing emotionally at the edge of that exact moment because their feelings for you have grown far beyond curiosity, far beyond temporary attachment, far beyond anything they originally intended to allow. For a long time, they believed they still had control over the connection. They thought they could keep their emotions measured and distant enough to avoid vulnerability. But emotions that are real do not disappear simply because someone fears them. Instead, they deepen quietly. They grow in silence. They attach themselves to ordinary memories until suddenly a person realizes their entire emotional world has begun revolving around someone they once tried to keep at a safe distance. That realization has reached them now. And it has unsettled them deeply. Because your presence no longer feels optional in their emotional life. There are moments lately where they stop in the middle of ordinary routines and think about you without warning. Not because they are forcing the thought, but because your energy has become naturally woven into their emotional rhythm. A song reminds them of your voice. A quiet evening reminds them of conversations with you. A certain kind of silence reminds them of the comfort they feel when your presence enters their mind unexpectedly. And every time this happens, the same feeling returns stronger than before. They want to know you more deeply than they currently do. Stay here with this message a little longer, because what unfolds tonight reaches deeper than appearances. The search for your dress was never truly about finding a physical place alone. It became symbolic of something larger unfolding inside them. They are searching for access. Emotional access. A way to move closer to the parts of you they sense but have not fully reached yet. They want to understand the version of you that exists beyond surface conversations. The version that quietly carries dreams, fears, memories, exhaustion, tenderness, loneliness, hope. Because somewhere along the way, they realized they care about all of it. And that realization changed the connection entirely. At first, they tried convincing themselves these emotions would fade naturally if ignored long enough. But instead of fading, everything intensified. Your absence became more noticeable. Your silence became emotionally louder. Even small interactions with you began affecting their mood more deeply than they wanted to admit. That frightened them. Not because the feelings were bad, but because the feelings were real. And real emotions demand honesty eventually. Do not skip this next part, because you may finally understand why everything has felt emotionally unfinished between you. There has always been timing surrounding this connection that neither of you fully understood. Every time the connection tried moving deeper emotionally, something interrupted it. Hesitation, fear, circumstances, emotional uncertainty. It was as if life kept pausing the story before either of you could fully acknowledge what was happening. But pauses are not endings. Sometimes pauses exist so two people can grow emotionally strong enough to handle what comes next. And both of you have been growing quietly during this distance. You have learned how to value your peace more carefully. You have learned that your heart deserves consistency instead of confusion. You have learned how to stop shrinking yourself emotionally for people unwilling to meet you with sincerity. Meanwhile, this person has been learning something equally important. That meaningful connection cannot survive forever inside silence. That realization has become impossible for them to ignore now. Because lately, every path of thought leads back toward you again. There are nights where they replay entire conversations in their mind, searching for hidden signs they missed before. They analyze your words carefully. They think about moments where your energy softened unexpectedly. They wonder whether your silence also carried emotions you never fully revealed aloud. And deep down, they believe it did. Because there were moments between you that felt too emotionally charged to be accidental. Moments where the atmosphere itself seemed to slow down. Moments where neither of you fully knew what to say because the connection underneath the conversation suddenly became impossible to ignore. They remember those moments clearly. Far more clearly than you realize. And lately, those memories have been returning to them constantly. Stay till the end. Because something important is quietly approaching between your lives. This person has begun imagining what would happen if they stopped protecting themselves emotionally and simply told the truth. Not dramatic confessions. Not overwhelming declarations. Just honesty. Honest acknowledgement that your presence matters to them deeply. Honest acknowledgement that they think about you far more than they should if this connection were truly casual. Honest acknowledgement that somewhere along the way, you became emotionally significant in ways they can no longer deny. And strangely, every time they imagine speaking honestly to you, they feel both terrified and relieved at the same time. Terrified because vulnerability changes everything. Relieved because silence has become emotionally exhausting. They are tired of pretending your absence does not affect them. Tired of carrying emotions privately while acting composed externally. Tired of watching the connection remain suspended between uncertainty and truth. And perhaps most of all, they are tired of wondering whether you already feel the same thing too. Because somewhere inside them, they suspect you do. Not necessarily in identical ways, but deeply enough for the connection to feel mutual. That possibility both comforts and overwhelms them simultaneously. Because mutual emotion means everything suddenly becomes real. Do not skip this next moment, my child. Because it carries something your heart needs to hear tonight. You were never invisible to this person. Even during silence. Even during distance. Even during emotionally confusing seasons. They noticed far more about you than they ever admitted aloud. They noticed how you hide emotional exhaustion behind calmness. They noticed how your kindness remains present even after disappointment. They noticed how carefully you protect other people's feelings while quietly carrying your own pain alone. And slowly, without realizing it, they began emotionally admiring not only your presence, but your character. That admiration became attachment before they understood what was happening. And attachment became longing. Longing not simply to speak with you, but to truly know you. To understand your world. To stand closer to your heart than anyone else does. That longing has been growing quietly inside them for months now. And no matter how much they tried controlling it, your energy kept reaching them emotionally anyway. There is another truth unfolding tonight that neither of you can avoid forever. This connection has reached a point where emotional honesty is becoming necessary. Not because anyone is forcing it, but because the feelings themselves are becoming too meaningful to remain hidden indefinitely. There are certain connections in life that eventually demand clarity simply because of how deeply they affect the people involved. This is becoming one of them. And lately, this person has started realizing something important about you that changed their entire emotional perspective. You are not searching desperately for attention anymore. You are searching for peace. That difference matters deeply. Because peace attracts sincerity while desperation attracts confusion. And your emotional energy has shifted into something calmer, wiser, stronger. They can feel that transformation even from a distance. Which means now, if they approach you emotionally, they know they must do it honestly or not at all. No half-truths. No emotional inconsistency. No pretending their feelings are smaller than they truly are. And that realization has forced them into deep reflection lately. Because for perhaps the first time in a very long time, they are considering what genuine emotional commitment actually means. Not fantasy. Not temporary excitement. Real emotional presence. The kind that requires courage. The kind that requires vulnerability. The kind that requires two people to stop hiding behind fear. And every time they imagine offering that honesty to you, something inside them softens completely. Because deep down, your presence feels safe to them. Not safe in a childish way. Safe in a rare emotional way. A feeling that they can finally lower emotional defenses around you without constantly fearing judgment or rejection. That kind of emotional safety is extraordinarily rare. And once a person experiences it genuinely, they cannot easily forget it. That is why they keep returning emotionally toward you no matter how hard they try creating distance. Your energy became emotionally grounding for them. A quiet place inside their chaotic inner world. Stay here a little longer, because tonight something beautiful is becoming clearer. This person has slowly begun understanding that the emotional connection between you is not built on illusion. It is built on recognition. Recognition of something familiar, calming, meaningful. Recognition that your souls understand each other in ways words have not fully explained yet. That understanding changes how they see the future now. Before, they viewed life emotionally through caution. Now they find themselves imagining possibilities instead. Possibilities involving honesty. Possibilities involving closeness. Possibilities involving finally allowing themselves to stop running from what they feel. And every time they imagine those possibilities with you, their fear weakens slightly more. Because your energy does not create emotional chaos inside them. It creates emotional clarity. That difference matters more than you know. There are moments where they catch themselves smiling unexpectedly while thinking about you. Moments where memories involving you replay in their mind with unusual warmth. Moments where they suddenly wonder what your day was like, whether you are resting enough, whether you still think about them during quiet hours too. Those thoughts arrive naturally now. Without force. Without effort. Without denial. And slowly, they are beginning to realize that what they feel for you is no longer something temporary they can casually walk away from. It has roots now. Deep emotional roots. That realization has transformed them internally in ways they have not fully revealed to anyone. Do not skip this next part, because it carries the emotional center of everything unfolding tonight. This person is afraid of one thing more than vulnerability itself now. They are afraid of losing the opportunity to know what this connection could truly become. That fear has become stronger lately. Not panic. Not desperation. Just awareness. Awareness that meaningful people do not remain emotionally available forever if nobody has the courage to reach toward them sincerely. And deep inside themselves, they know your heart is changing too. Healing. Growing. Protecting its peace more carefully than before. Which means if they continue waiting indefinitely, the emotional distance between you may eventually harden into permanence. That possibility unsettles them deeply. Because for the first time, they are beginning to imagine life without your presence emotionally nearby. And they do not like how empty that possibility feels. So now, quietly, privately, emotionally, they are preparing themselves. Preparing for honesty. Preparing to lower defenses. Preparing to finally stop pretending the connection means less than it truly does. And while none of this has fully reached the surface yet, you are already feeling the emotional waves of it internally. That is why your intuition feels restless lately. That is why certain thoughts keep circling back unexpectedly. That is why your spirit senses change approaching even before reality fully confirms it. Because emotionally, both of you are standing near the same threshold now. A threshold where silence can no longer comfortably survive. A threshold where truth begins pressing gently against every emotional wall still standing between you. And my child, the moment that wall finally breaks completely, everything between your lives will begin changing in ways neither heart is fully prepared for yet.